Now, we're not talking about some fancy noble sipping tea in a castle tower, and we're definitely not talking about a muddy farmer planting potatoes in the middle of a storm. But somehow, no matter what class you're from, their name reaches your ears faster than the church bell at 5 a.m. Yes, today we're following the story of someone who didn't hold high office, didn't own any land, and definitely didn't ride around in a golden carriage. But she had a strange power, the kind of charm that made men fall off horses, apologize to their wives, promise they'd behave, then turn right back around to go look for her again. She was a woman who lived by candlelight, worked by moonlight, and sometimes slept just as the rooster crowed. She was none other than a medieval courtesan, a woman who was both a symbol of temptation and a victim of society's harshest judgments, and of course, the proud owner of the deadliest side-eye in the entire hospitality industry. Now do you think her days were all roses and silk sheets? Or were they more like smoke, cheap perfume, and enough drama to rival a full moon wine festival in the village? But here's the real question. Who was she really? A seductress of men? Or a scapegoat of an entire era? So buckle up, folks. We're stepping into a world that's as sparkly as a fall fair and as twisty as a nobleman's garden maze. Grab your wooden clogs, bring a paper fan with one broken rib, and follow me to a little stone room where love, money, and the rare scent of real soap all come together. Oh, and if you've made it this far, how about a little love for the channel? Hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and drop a quick comment telling us where you're watching from and what time it is where you are. It means the world to me, and it helps me keep making videos just like this for awesome people like you. Waking up in a castle? Oh no, sweetie, that's princess business. As for our medieval courtesan, she opened her eyes in a teeny-tiny room tucked above a rowdy tavern, or, if the stars aligned just right, in a back room near the local market, where the scent of dried fish, half-burned candles, and something suspiciously unidentifiable lingered like a party no one invited you to. The bed creaked louder than the drunken knight's promises from the night before. Her blanket, or more accurately, an upgraded curtain, barely clung to her, offering just enough warmth to survive and just enough dignity to pretend everything's fine. And forget alarm clocks. Instead, she was blessed by the glorious chorus of the neighbor's rooster auditioning for the medieval voice, paired with a veggie seller outside shouting prices like she was hosting a royal auction. She opened her eyes and sighed. Another long night, not for love nor for art, but because the tavern's wine fumes had floated upstairs so sweetly, they tricked her into dreaming she was a walking goblet of honey mead. Her room, a curious hybrid, half resting place, half makeshift beauty shop. On one side, a wobbly wooden table covered in makeup pots, perfume oils, ribbons, and a scratched bronze mirror, her weapons of choice in the ancient beauty war. On the other, an empty water bucket, a comb with 2 teeth left, and a stray cat named Monsieur Chubby, who regularly broke in through the window looking to borrow a warm corner every cold morning. On the wall hung a curtain printed with an angel, supposedly a symbol of hope, though mostly it just covered up the mold spreading faster than market gossip. Before she could sigh an epic "Oh my life," she pushed herself up, hair a full bird's nest in winter conference mode, grabbed whatever cloth she could find to wrap herself, and began the heroic quest for her wooden clogs. The same ones she kicked under the bed last night, out of exhaustion or sheer rage at a cheating card player. Who knows? Dear Lord, she muttered, please don't let the customers ask about the meaning of life again today. The only meaning I know is that breakfast exists, and it's exactly 3 houses down in a pot of scallion porridge. She pulled back the curtain, well, the singed corner of fabric that once dreamed of being a curtain. Sunlight streamed, in brushing her still-painted cheeks and smudged eyeliner, revealing a face not of royalty, but of radiant resilience, the look of a woman who didn't need a crown, just a hot meal and a drama-free day. Now hold on, just to be fair, we ought to ask, how did an average medieval maiden start her day? Simple. Rooster crows, she's up, face washed in icy well water, instantly awake. Hair brushed with a wooden comb passed down by Dad? That's tradition. Then straight to the garden to yank up veggies, clean out the chicken coop and scrub the copper pot for her future mother-in-law. Modest, diligent, and smelling suspiciously like turnip sweat and destiny. But our beloved courtesan, rooster, crows, she's still mid-dream, kissing a Venetian merchant who promised her 5 gold bars if she'd just nod ever so sweetly. By the time she wakes up, her head's pounding like she spent the night singing chant harmonies with the monastery choir, her eyes still decorated with yesterday's makeup, her lips dry as military bread, and her first thought is, oh no. What day is it again? The village girl rises early with hope in her heart, dreaming of marrying the sweet blacksmith who smells like iron and kindness. Our courtesan. She sleeps in, because last night she spent over 2 hours pretending to care about a count's existential ramblings and then feigned deep interest in the shine of his leather boots. The average girl worries about which dress to wear to Sunday Mass. Our courtesan, she worries whether today's client prefers the fiery red gown in French flair or the dreamy purple number from Florence. A medieval maiden wakes up to live, a day that's simple, exhausting but peaceful. The courtesan, she wakes up like she's stepping onto a Shakespearean stage, where every scene involves scheming nobles, flickering candlelight, forced applause, and occasionally falling out a second-story window while dodging a wine tab. After rousing herself with a ceremonial morning stretch that might have summoned the gods of sore muscles, our courtesan approached the most sacred part of the day, breakfast. Well, to call it breakfast is to undersell it. Let's go with the grand banquet of a goddess who survived the night of drunken poetry and questionable clients. On the table? No, dear, there was no table, just an overturned wine barrel repurposed with the elegance of desperation. As for food, if fate smiled, there'd be a piece of black bread hard as peasant flooring, a loaf so ancient it demanded to be dipped in old wine. Or fresh tears. That bread had been resting there all night, possibly since last week, staring into the void, unbothered. It was so firm she had to crack it with both hands, bracing her shoulders like a villager hauling water uphill. Its crust? Crunchy as roof tiles. The center? Dense and moist with the scent of malt forgotten in the attic. One bite, crack, teeth clash, heart quivers. But then, she smiled, as if that bone-dry bite was the flavor of freedom in a world without credit cards or buttercream frosting. Next to it, a modest chunk of goat cheese, slightly sour, affectionately referred to as naturally aged by the will of the gods. And for a drink? A cup of boiled then forgotten water, also known as medieval detox tea. Then came the goat cheese, soft in the middle, tough around the edges, and radiating the aroma of a knight's socks after a 3-day horse ride. To her, though, it was luxury. She sliced it with a dull knife borrowed from the downstairs kitchen, shaving off a sliver thinner than her hope for true love. The sharp tang rushed up her nose, snapping her awake, along with every illusion she ever had about life. Some mornings, heaven smiled brighter. She'd have half an apple, a little bruised around the edges but still kissed by wind and soil. Misshapen, yes, but the closest thing to fruit she'd tasted all month. One bite, crisp, tart, and packed with memories. She sighed, recalling the last time she ate a whole apple. A monk gave it to her after she redeemed his soul. Though, really, he just liked her Welsh ballad about love and unpaid rent. And then, she'd open her tiny jar of honey. No. Bigger than a lip balm. No scooping. Just a gentle dab on the bread. The warmth spread across her tongue like the last sunbeam through a window at dusk. She closed her eyes. 1 second. Just 1 second. Where the world faded and only one thought remained. I should really cover those under-eye bags today. Now imagine you, a modern human, sitting down to her breakfast. Bread brick. You'd Google how to use it to exfoliate your feet. Goat cheese of destiny. You'd post it on Instagram with the caption, "Cry eating this fermented sock cheese." Enlighten me, food gods. Half-bruised apple. You'd wrap it up and head to the store to exchange it for cold-pressed organic juice. Mini honey jar. You'd mistake it for a free sample from your last online order. And you'd sit there, scrunching your nose, muttering, "How did anyone survive back then?" But our courtesan? She finished her feast, fixed her hair, reapplied her lipstick, and smiled at the world as if she'd just dined in the royal hall of Versailles, while the courtesan upstairs was rationing her breakfast like a squirrel during winter, gnawing at black bread hard enough to pave the town square, somewhere far, far away, perhaps in a castle the size of a tax collector's ego. A noblewoman let out a dainty yawn in her silk nightgown, lounging on a bed large enough to board 3 cows, and a harpist, her breakfast, served in bed, of course, laid out on a polished silver tray, slices of cured meat, venison sausage, honey-glazed pastries, soft-boiled eggs poised in porcelain cups, and dates imported from the exotic East, peeled naturally by a servant with hands softer than a panna cotta on a summer's day. And to drink? Not well water, not that murky peasant ale. No, milady sipped jasmine tea steeped with water from the River Thames, boiled 3 times to banish both bacteria and bad luck. Meanwhile, back in the creaky second-floor room, our courtesan perched on a 3-legged stool, dodging the 3rd cockroach of the morning, while gnawing sour cheese like it was a test of spirit. If she scrunched her face at the tang, the noblewoman merely tapped her silver spoon on her cup and declared, "This tea is a touch common. Brew it again, would you?" On one side, a breakfast feast fit for royalty and bowels alike. On the other, a daily survival mission disguised as a meal. But when you think about it, the noblewoman ate to preserve her youth. The courtesan, she ate to preserve her existence. Far from ivory towers, past a potato field and 3 confused field mice, the medieval farmer began his day, without need for roosters or alarm bells, thanks to his wife's voice echoing across the dawn. "Get out here and shovel the cow dung." Louder than any divine sign, really. His breakfast? Oh, it was simple. So simple, in fact, that if a noble's breakfast was a 5-star buffet, the farmer's was straight out of a survival handbook titled, "How to Outlive the Apocalypse with 1 Pot and No Dignity." Main course, barley porridge, thick as glue, sticky as hope in the next harvest. No salt, no honey, no egg on top. Because the chickens were being raised for the noble cause of maybe being sold to pay taxes someday. The porridge was served with silence. Because the family was still half asleep, or too busy fighting over the 1 wooden ladle that hadn't split in half. And the drink? A bowl of water, lovingly scooped from the well behind the pigsty. Sometimes, if luck allowed, it carried a whisper of mint, not for flavor, mind you, but because a leaf fell in yesterday when someone was catching rainwater in an old helmet. Personal hygiene, a war fought with water and tears. Waking up on the 2nd floor of a tavern, in a room where the humidity could wrestle a potato seller into submission, the courtesan began her beauty ritual, not because she wanted to, but because the world demanded she sparkle. Even if her sleep had been shorter than a summer breeze, or her last client smelled worse than 5-day-old dried fish, she still had to shine, like an oil lamp fighting a hurricane. First up, personal. Hygiene, sounds fancy, right? Well, if she had water, she'd be among the elite few in an era where clean water was rarer than a love letter that didn't smudge. The face-washing water? Usually the leftover broth water from last night's soup, filtered through. Sheer hope and a scrap of cloth. If it happened to rain, she'd rush to catch it off the rooftop, while carefully avoiding the spot with the bird nest, for reasons everyone knows but no one dares speak aloud. With a handful of river-cold water slapped onto her face, she'd grab a worn linen rag, called a towel. But really, it was medieval exfoliation at its finest. No skincare routine, just friction and faith. Makeup, the art of survival via stove and chicken coop. Once washed, she moved on to makeup, a sacred ritual where creativity tangoed with desperation. These cosmetics weren't bought at the market. They were brewed in a cramped kitchen right next to a mouse hole in a dream, Foundation, a signature blend of white flour and a pinch of fireplace ash, sifted through a bean sorting net. The result? A ghostly pallor, like she'd just returned from the dead, which, oddly enough, was in back then. Pale skin meant you didn't work. The fields, which meant you were expensive. Blush? Not a gentle pat of Parisian rouge, oh no. She rubbed beet juice or fermented fruit on her cheeks. Occasionally, wilted flower petals soaked in warm water would do the trick. The result? A flushed look as delicate as spring during a drought. Lipstick? Easy. A smear of red clay mixed with water, or she'd chew on wild berries and dab the juice on with a finger. No brush, no mirror. Just trust in the flickering glow of an oil lamp. Sometimes her lips looked luscious, other times a tragic mural of misplaced intentions. Her thoughts, and a crooked smile. Even with trembling hands and eyes shadowed from listening to a customer ramble on about the meaning of life for 4 straight hours, she sat tall. With a goose fat and ash, eyeliner in hand, she reminded herself, be beautiful, not to be loved, but to be paid on time. She smiled into her dull bronze mirror, a reflection too foggy to show her face, yet clear enough to show her fate. That smile, crooked but unbreakable, stood like a cracked statue still holding its pose in the middle of the square. Now imagine a modern Gen Z girl stumbling into that room. Someone used to skincare serums, facial cleansing devices, and cushion compacts from Korea. She'd probably gasp. Wait, flour is powder? Am I in some prehistoric TikTok challenge? And the moment she smeared red clay on her lips, her face would spell out 3 words. Unsubscribe right now. But to the medieval courtesan, this was art. Not because it was perfect, but because it survived. Amid poverty, cheap ale, and customers yelling over spilled beer, she still painted her face. Because when you can't change your fate, you change your face to fight it. Rehearsing lines and practicing instruments. When a courtesan is more than just a pretty face but a stage artist, don't think that a medieval courtesan's only assets were her charming laugh and skimpy dress. If she wanted to level to a high-class courtesan, the kind who made every visitor tip his hat in respect, she had to become a versatile performer, skilled in singing, acting, and playing the flute, without missing a single note. The lines. It's not just, "You're so pretty, can I follow you?" Today, you might see streamers or TikTokers rehearsing lines in front of a camera. But back in the 13th century, courtesans had to rest their heads on dusty old books and memorize every line for the evening's show. These weren't casual lines like, "You're so beautiful, come with me," but flowing love poems, romantic stories, even funny skits meant to entertain their patrons. She had to train her voice on every syllable so that when she spoke, it melted hearts, without wrecking her throat from singing all night long. Imagine her sitting in a tiny room, quietly mumbling lines like a circus acrobat rehearsing flips. Fairy tale verses, sweet confessions repeated until she was sick of them. But the moment a customer stepped in, she transformed into a tireless swan. Practicing instruments, from lutes to flutes, that wasn't all. To impress noblemen or wealthy merchants, a top-tier courtesan had to master at least one musical instrument. Usually it was the lute, a small, delicate instrument with a sweet ringing tone, or the bamboo flute, a common instrument of the day. Picture her by a narrow window, candlelight flickering on a rough wooden table, her nimble fingers plucking lute strings, smiling softly at her cracked mirror. A scene romantic in theory, but in reality, the lute's tuning was often off, producing a sound as sharp as a cat's yowl. Her hands ached from pressing the strings and blowing the flute for hours, while the oil lamp flickered low, and when a patron suddenly showed up for a quality check, she had to instantly morph into a talented artist, pain be damned. The perks and pressures of the trade rehearsing lines and instruments didn't just raise her cover charge in customers' eyes. It helped her forget the exhausting days and kindle a flicker of hope that she wasn't just selling her body. She was an artist, even if her stage was a rickety wooden table in the dark corner of a tavern. Still, sometimes she wondered if only there was a magical lute that played itself, or lines that could memorize themselves. But the profession had chosen her, and she chose it back, with all the resilience and just a dash of dreaming. Sometimes she'd smile at the fat, lazy cat lounging on the lute's keyboard, interrupting a tune with a screech of claws. Then she'd refocus, blow her flute, sing from deep inside, rehearsing every word so that when night fell, she'd become a shining star, even if just in a dim, damp corner where music, laughter, and sighs blended. She dreamed of a day when she wouldn't be stuck in a gloomy tavern but standing on a grand stage, candlelight sparkling, crowds clapping wildly, and the lute's music soaring like an angel's song. But life as a courtesan was full of trials. Once, while rehearsing in front of the mirror, she just started to sing when the oil lamp tipped over, plunging the whole room into darkness. She could only laugh, thinking, guess the music gods haven't blessed me yet. And tavern patrons weren't always easy. There was the big loud guy who loved to hear her sing but always ordered drinks by banging on the table, forcing her to sing through the racket. One night, mid-song, he got up, coughed, and said, "You sing like a sparrow with a stuffy nose." She wanted nothing more than to snap her lute strings and throw them at him. Yet some nights she sang so well the customers went silent, listening so intently they forgot their drinks. That's when she knew her dream of being a singer wasn't just a joke. She smiled to herself. Tomorrow I'll rehearse lines and songs again, to be the queen of the tavern, not just a tavern girl. Light gossip with the girls in the trade. Last night, that Margaret stole my customer. The flickering light of the tavern's oil lamp was starting to fade, but in the shadowy corner of the cramped boarding room, Anna and a few other girls huddled close, whispering about their work. Just catching their breath after a long day, they were ready to call out Margaret, the most dangerous woman in the whole boarding house. Anna, eyes narrowed with determination, told the story like it was an undeniable tragedy. Last night that Margaret stole my customer. At first he was looking at me with a friendly smile, but then with just one glance and a smile like, "Oh, she's prettier than you." He was in her arms before I knew it. The other girls all sighed in unison, like they'd just lost a priceless treasure. Everyone knew Margaret had her tricks for keeping customers. She didn't just talk sweet, she had a way of making people laugh until they cried. For as long as anyone could remember, Margaret had been winning over the wealthy men with funny stories about tavern life and the juiciest market gossip. Anna continued, her face a mix of frustration and surprise. While I was playing my flute, she was cracking jokes and making the whole room burst out laughing. Even the guy sitting next to me had to turn and look. One of the older girls took a small sip of wine and shook her head. "That's right, Margaret's got a silver tongue. I've lost customers to her a few times and didn't even know how." Another chimed in, "But honestly, Margaret's not a bad singer either. Once I heard her sing, I almost teared up. She's that good." Everyone laughed together, a mix of regret and respect for their rival sister. Then the stories got a little more creative. Maybe not 100% true, but definitely livened up the room. I heard Margaret's even sneaking around with the tavern keeper. One night, I saw them clipping each other's nails and staying up all night. Anna clapped her hands and burst out laughing, then did a funny impression of the tavern keeper. "Miss, you gotta hear me sing. Don't listen fine, but if you do, you'll be hooked." The others roared with laughter, each adding their own wild twist as if they were watching a never-ending comedy show. Finally, Anna looked around at the group, eyes shining with a mix of hope and pride, still holding on to the spirit of their craft. "Ladies, don't be too down. This job's like a marketplace. Customers pick who they want, and all we can do is make sure they have a good time with us. Tonight, Margaret stole one, but tomorrow he'll be back with me. What matters is we still have our voices, our smiles, and good wine to serve." Everyone nodded in agreement. "That's right, we're not just selling looks, we're selling the heart of our craft." The gossip about Margaret that night was just a small piece of the colorful life of medieval courtesans. But through it, we glimpsed the sisterhood, the fierce yet funny competition, and the resilient lives living amid smoke, bitter drinks, and flickering candlelight. A zesty noon lunch for the courtesan in the palace or serving the nobles. As the sun climbed high, sunlight poured through the stained glass windows of the palace, and the courtesan began preparing for her special midday meal. Not just a meal, but a performance everyone eagerly awaited. Lunch with cold cuts and rock-hard bread. Unlike the humble meals outside, her lunch was a small, elegant tray featuring cold cuts, carefully seasoned, sliced thin enough to be neither too soft nor too tough, so the nobles could nibble gracefully without losing their dignity. Alongside was bread as hard as, well, a brick, a delicacy that the highborn saw as a mark of true medieval class. She bit into a piece of that tough bread, her tongue almost bleeding, but still managed a gentle smile. Oh, this bread here. One wrong bite and it could double as a self-defense weapon. A deep red goblet of wine was lifted to rescue her palate from the dryness of the bread. Taking a sip, she thought quietly, "This wine explains why nobles live so long. Their bones must be as solid as stone. To survive this, showtime, teaching dance, playing music, and reciting poetry. No rest after eating." She had to quickly gather herself to entertain her guests with her skills. First up, teaching dance. Not the fiery kind dancers do today, but polite, slightly awkward steps that the nobles absolutely adored. She gently guided their feet while secretly thinking, "If I forget a step and that lord takes a tumble, I'm as good as dead." Then came the music and singing, her artistic peak. The gentle strum of the lute filled the room, her soulful song softening the atmosphere. Sometimes she'd forget the lyrics mid-song, shrugging with a shy smile and spinning a funny story to keep the mood light, making the nobles laugh heartily, and forget her slip-up. Finally, the poetry reading, considered the pinnacle of her art. Romantic verses, tinged with just a hint of light-hearted drama, poured out with passion. Occasionally, she'd spice it up with personal tales, drawing the audience in as if she were sharing secrets from the depths of her heart. Though the meal was a bit quirky, rock-hard bread and thin slices of cold meat, this was the moment the courtesan truly shone each day, not just for her beauty, but for the talents that made the nobles utterly enchanted. She knew that behind that dazzling appearance were smiles, sweat, and patience, all necessary to survive, a world that was as harsh as it was colorful. When the sun rises high, a common courtesan's midday tale. While the palace courtesans sip wine, nibble on cold cuts, and crunch down on rock-hard bread, our humble courtesan's noon story unfolds quite differently. Simple, a bit shaky at times, but no less lively. A light snack of thin porridge, sometimes crumbs of stale bread. Her midday usually begins with a meal full of mercy. Thin porridge hastily cooked with just a few scraps of greens and grains, enough to quiet the growling stomach. Sometimes she scavenges leftover crumbs from the bakery stall at the market, things others toss aside as worthless treasures, but to her, they're pure gold. She bites into a crumb of bread, grimacing but trying to look like she's enjoying it. Oh, this flavor. Truly a delicacy of the poor. You taste this and suddenly life feels a bit richer. After this modest snack, she starts her search for a cool spot to rest. Because honestly, in those cramped, stuffy boarding houses, a patch of shade and a gentle breeze are luxury enough. Usually, she rounds up a few sisters in the trade, and they sneak off to some hidden corner of the market or the attic of a tavern. Places no one dares to bother them. And as for dodging the rent, well, that's an art form in survival, she thinks to herself. Rent's not paid today. Guess I'll just disappear for a while, spare the landlord the headache. Evading rent doesn't always work out, but at least it spices up life with a little extra drama, fitting for her line of work. A common courtesan's noon has no wine, no cold cuts, no lute music or poetry readings, but it's packed with real-life stories, forced smiles, and those wild moments that help her survive another harsh day. And so, in that simple, tough existence, she lives on with a resilient spirit, full of that true artist's grit. In some parts of medieval Europe, courtesans didn't always have to stay undercover or in the shadows. In those places, their trade was actually legal and open, with clear red light districts dedicated just for them. But, hey, nothing in life is free. Local authorities knew exactly how to cash in on these women by slapping on some pretty heavy taxes. Imagine a courtesan carefully counting her coins, thinking, "Oh, wow, these taxes are high, but whatever. I'll pay up as long as I can keep working without getting thrown in jail." Many see this as a very practical business system of the Middle Ages, keeping society in check, filling the treasury, and preventing the hassle of chasing down illegal workers. But the story doesn't stop there. High-class courtesans weren't just pretty faces decorating palaces. They were some of the sharpest spies of their time. Did you know many courtesans doubled as spies for nobles, even kings? That's right. Through late-night intimate gatherings, whispered conversations, and charming smiles, they gathered loads of secret information that the powerful couldn't get their hands on otherwise. So, courtesans were not just lovers. They were keepers of secrets, savvy political tools, and essential cogs in the power machine. A courtesan could be singing a song, sharing juicy gossip with a noble, and then casually passing that info along to her side, leaving many nobles shaking in their boots after being played like a deck of cards. Just imagine it. These women weren't just holding a wine glass or strumming a lute. They wielded the hidden power of entire kingdoms. It was a colorful life where a single glance, smile, or song could change the fate of whoever heard it. And of course, there was no shortage of jealousy, backstabbing, verbal battles, and juicy call-outs that made courtesan life both tense and, frankly, pretty entertaining. Are you feeling sleepy yet? Well, let me tell you the story of Tannhäuser, the legendary courtesan spy. Actually, her real name wasn't Tannhäuser. That's a name from legend. So let's call her Isolde, a famous courtesan from medieval Europe, living in a bustling trading town where news was worth its weight in gold. Isolde wasn't just any girl. She had a beauty that could melt even the coldest nobles, plus a way with words that made anyone open up and spill their secrets. But that's not all. Isolde had a sharp mind and magic ears, able to catch and remember every whispered word over a glass of wine or hushed talks behind closed doors. At those lavish royal parties where nobles gathered to discuss the fate of kingdoms, she was an essential part, not just for entertainment, but also to pluck valuable information. One day, a powerful nobleman, worried about a plot to overthrow the throne, came to Isolde. Using her charm and wit, she got close to the shadowy masterminds behind the scheme, not with weapons or violence, but with grace and conversation. Isolde made them confidently lay out their rebellion plans, like they were just chatting over afternoon tea. She not only memorized every detail, but skillfully steered the talks to gather even more vital info: dates, methods, participants, and who would be betrayed. A true spy wrapped in a seductive package. Anyone hearing this would be impressed. And she didn't stop there. Isolde knew how to safely and cleverly pass the info to her employer, avoiding any danger lurking in the shadows. Thanks to her, the court got wind of the plot in time and crushed it before it could unfold, keeping the king's throne safe. From then on, Isolde was admired not just for her beauty and singing talent, but respected as a powerful ghost behind the scenes. She proved the saying true: don't judge a book by its cover. Because in the harsh world of the Middle Ages, a smile could hide countless schemes, and a whisper could change the fate of a kingdom. What makes her story even more fascinating is that her job was both glamorous and dangerous politically. Being a courtesan wasn't just about entertainment. It was a high-stakes power game. Every word, every glance could be a sharp weapon. Some days she had to sing, chat, and perform all at once, keeping clients happy while secretly digging for intel. Then at night she'd quietly plan how to stay safe, knowing invisible enemies lurked nearby. No wonder historians always say she was the symbol of hidden power and masterful subtlety in the royal underground. A courtesan wasn't just a lover, but a keeper of the balance of power, changing the destiny of rulers with a single whisper. So there you have it. The story of Isolde, the courtesan spy, teaching us not only history but offering a fresh look into the complex and colorful world of the Middle Ages. You might think the courtesan's life is full of scandal, but for someone like Isolde, it was an art. The art of survival, the art of war with brains, and the art of outwitting fate itself. Turns out, behind all the fancy dresses and enchanting smiles, there's a mysterious life full of stories no one would expect. If you want, I can tell you more about the clever battles and rivalries between courtesans, nobles, and deadly enemies next time. Ah, a medieval evening. For a courtesan, that was the ultimate showtime of the day. Think of it like a blockbuster concert today, only without lasers or booming sound systems. Just flickering straw candles and the soft strum of a lute filling the air. Picture the courtesan stepping into a tavern. A lively spot packed with all kinds of customers, from cloaked noblemen sporting feathered hats, looking every bit the part of high society, to portly merchants dressed plainly, but brimming with ambition, and a few roughnecks staring into their mugs like it's their last lifeline. The room glows not with electric lights, but from the warm, dancing flames of oil lamps and candles on the tables, casting a mysterious, seductive haze over everything. She climbs onto the small stage, really just a rickety wooden platform, that leans a bit, wearing a dazzling gown stitched together from leftover scraps of brightly colored fabrics, like a peacock showing off its tail. Her hair's carefully pinned up, dusted with a bit of flour, to keep her from blending into the crowd, and her face painted with rouge made from beet juice or clay. The medieval courtesan's version of a beauty routine. The instruments are ready, lute, small hand drum, maybe a long flute, just enough to get the mood buzzing. The courtesan begins to sing. Her voice fills the cozy space, warm and enchanting. Love ballads, tales of knights' adventures, or cheeky romantic stories with a wink, all holding the audience spellbound. Her dance is just as captivating, soft and graceful like a cat playing in moonlight, yet teasing enough to make the guys at the tables drool like they're eyeing a fresh-out-of-the-oven pie. Every now and then, she tosses in a playful knee lift or a gentle hand flutter, like she's flirting with the light itself. Subtle but bold moves that grab everyone's attention. Guests laugh and chat, sipping on wine or dark ale, a signature, brew made from fermented barley, with just enough bitterness to warm you up on a cold night. Some might join in with flute playing, others clap along or munch on dry bread while marveling at her skill. But the courtesan isn't just a performer. She's also the social butterfly, the listener, and the life of the party. When a nobleman slumps over drunk, she quietly sits beside him, singing a soothing lullaby to ease his drunkenness, or deftly helps him up and out the door to save him from embarrassment. As the night deepens, the atmosphere grows rowdier. Jokes fly, laughter booms, and sometimes little arguments spark up. But the courtesan always plays the perfect peacemaker, calming things down with a charming smile, a lively dance, or a teasing song that gets everyone laughing. Behind all that golden candlelight and flowing music, though, lies a clever strategy. She sings to entertain, but also watches keenly, remembering every face, every whispered story, and every complicated connection between nobles and merchants. In the world of courtesans, information is the greatest power, and her voice is the perfect cover to subtly gather it all. And of course, after each show, she collects her pay, sometimes in coins, sometimes in small gifts like an old ring or a fragrant pouch of pepper, enough to keep her going and ready for the next challenging day. So you see, a courtesan's night isn't just about shining on stage. It's a living drama where beauty, music, and brains mix into a seductive, cunning symphony. And who says being a courtesan is just fun and games? It's a performance art mixed with a mental sport, where every eye is on her and she's the one running the show. Do you think her showtime sounds tempting enough to step into that tavern just once? If so, get ready, because it's not just music and dance, but secrets whispered in the shadows that make the night unforgettable. Ah yes, the moment when the courtesan meets her clients. Now that's where her true acting chops come into play. This isn't just a polite meet and greet. Oh no. It's a full-on performance, a theatrical hunt, if you will, brimming with color, drama, and more than a touch of comedy. First off, you've got to understand, medieval clientele came in all shapes and sizes, like a bustling flea market on a festival day. You had everything from humble townsfolk to flamboyant knights, even the occasional incognito priest trying to blend in. Each one required the courtesan to be clever, cautious, and smooth as butter with her words. Let's start with the everyday folk, tradesmen, blacksmiths, fishermen, or cattle herders who've wandered into town with a few coins in their pocket and curiosity in their eyes. They'd shuffle into the tavern, eyes darting like first-time gamblers at a poker table. The courtesan's job? Flash a charming smile, maybe a subtle nod to say, "You're welcome here," but never too bold. Heaven forbid she scare them. Off before they even sit down. Conversations with this crowd usually stayed light. Village gossip, grain prices, or how the cows won't stop mooing at midnight. But a good courtesan, she could sniff out moods like a bloodhound. Some guests came. To laugh, some needed comforting, and others just wanted a pretty face after a long day of selling turnips. Sometimes they'd bring her little gifts, pickled radishes or wild pears, making the moment feel more like a backyard picnic than a business transaction. Then came the knights, the so-called heroes of the realm, dressed in shiny armor, sword-swinging, and beards that screamed rugged charm. But don't let the swagger fool you. Many of these gallant men were as awkward as teenagers at prom when talking to a courtesan. They'd stride into the tavern like kings and declare, "Fair lady, grant me a night of glory." What they really meant, though, was, "Please, for the love of chivalry, give me a break from all this fighting and loneliness." With knights, the courtesan had to walk a fine line, graceful, attentive, and never missing a beat. She'd laugh at their ancient battle jokes, nod like she believed every word, and maybe hum a soft tune to soothe their weary hearts. In those candlelit moments, even the most battle-scarred knight could forget his wounds, at least until dawn. But perhaps the most entertaining clients were the mysterious ones, like the undercover monks. Yes, monks. The same holy men who preached purity by day would sneak into taverns at night looking for earthly delight. They'd show up with a Bible tucked under one arm and a guilty look in their eye, trying desperately not to blush. Some would sip wine, awkwardly reciting poems or breaking into sacred hymns as if that somehow made it less sinful. But our courtesan? She wasn't born yesterday. She'd seen this act 100 times. With the skill of a seasoned performer, she'd steer the conversation just right, sometimes playing coy and whispering, "Oh, holy sir, don't you think a little joy could refresh your spirit?" The poor monk would laugh nervously, fiddling with his robe and avoiding eye contact while the whole room tried not to snicker. That's the magic of a medieval courtesan. She wasn't just pretty. She was a master of moods, a chameleon of charm, a translator of emotions in a room full of wildly different souls. Every meeting was like a scene in a play, bursting with comedy, melancholy, and the occasional edible bribe. So don't you dare think being a courtesan was all silk dresses and easy coin. It took wit, wisdom, and a serious sense of humor to keep up with the most unpredictable clientele in the kingdom. And it sure came with its fair share of you-had-to-be-there moments. Can you imagine her dealing with a customer who forgot the punchline to his own story? Or a knight so drunk he recited his war tales backward? Or a monk who was so shy he nearly dropped his ceremonial hat in his soup? Each time, she'd have to think fast, crack a joke here, flash a smile there, all while keeping her poise like a queen of the tavern stage. In the end, meeting clients in the world of medieval courtesans wasn't a chore. It was an art, a colorful cabaret filled with tales, tunes, and a touch of drama. And the courtesan? With just a glance and a grin, she could charm an entire room, no matter who walked through that creaky tavern door. The art of price negotiation. This was when the medieval courtesan had to morph into a true diplomat, but not the silk-robed, tea-sipping kind you'd find in royal courts. No, this was tavern diplomacy, laced with sweat, soaked in booze, and slippery with words that slithered like snakes through damp grass. Truth be told, a courtesan in the Middle Ages who didn't know how to name her price was like a knight charging into battle without armor. See, clients came in all shapes and sizes, some jingling with gold coins, others scraping by with a few sad copper pieces, yet all expecting the full royal treatment. So every negotiation was a mental duel. She had to sharpen her ears, flex her brain, and soften her tongue until it was smoother than biscuit dough. The goal? To send each customer off smiling and still walk away with the price she wanted. Take this fellow, for instance. A blacksmith, fresh off payday, saunters into the tavern with stars in his eyes like he just hit the lottery. He looks her up and down and says, "Miss, I'd like a night as enchanting as the ballad you just sang, but I've only got 3 coins. She keeps pouring ale, calm as a cat in the sun, smiles sweetly and replies, "3 coins? Darling, for that price I can offer you a slow dance with my eyes." Now that was skill, knowing how to let a man down without bruising his ego. Make him laugh, make him feel clever, and most importantly, make sure he wants to come back next week when his pockets are fuller. Negotiating wasn't just haggling like fishwives at the market. It was a refined art, the art of holding your worth, charming your guest, and maybe even wrangling a tip out of thin air. With noblemen, though, oh, that was a different battlefield. They showed up with purses fat with coin, but also egos the size of castles. One might request she recite Latin poetry while massaging his back with lavender blossoms. Another wanted her to sing, in a voice that sounded just like his mother's, and all for a price as reasonable as a flying cow. That's when she had to pull out the real diplomatic flair. "My lord, such an elevated request may only be fulfilled by heavenly angels. But since your eyes rival the marble gaze of Apollo himself, I shall settle for just half a chest of gold." If luck was on her side, the noble would nod instantly. If not, he'd chuckle, call her witty, and toss a few extra coins her way, enchanted by her charm alone. There was even that one time a holy man, cloaked in piety, slipped into the tavern and asked with the straightest face, "Tell me, what's the price for a theological discussion?" She blinked, leaned close, and whispered, "Well, a plain moral chat? 1 silver. But if you'd like me to rub your shoulders with perfumed oil while we discuss salvation, add 2 more. And if you want me to strum the harp and nod solemnly as you preach virtue, you'll need to buy drinks for the whole room." Bottom line, price negotiation with a courtesan wasn't about coin. It was a graceful diplomatic dance. Words were weapons, smiles were armor, and charm was her sharpest blade. Anyone who just asked, "How much?" without learning to converse, wouldn't even earn a flirty glance, no matter how tall his stack of gold. So never underestimate a courtesan at the bargaining table. She was a master of persuasion, a psychological puppeteer with nothing but a wink and a witty line. Sometimes men paid extra just because she talked so well, and she hadn't even lifted a finger to sing or dance. That's the magic of it. In a smoky tavern where laughter echoed and ale flowed, negotiating a price wasn't bartering it. It was a charming battle of wits where the cleverest, smoothest player won both the purse and the heart. In a place where flickering candlelight could barely hide the rough edges of life, the medieval tavern, the night air wasn't just thick with the smell of cheap wine and sizzling lard. No, it carried something far more potent, the stench of cutthroat competition among the tavern's working ladies. This was a war without blood but full of fingernails, a battle without swords but armed with razor-sharp tongues. Yes, indeed, when the night fell and the tavern filled up, each courtesan became her own Black Friday pop-up shop. Whoever could wink better, charm quicker, and fake confusion more strategically was sure to walk away the winner. "Hey, the lady at the next table just dropped her prices." Sounds innocent enough, but oh no. It was a calculated whisper, soaked in booze and passed from lips to lips like wildfire on a thatched roof. In a blink, the whole tavern froze. Someone just broke the price wall. Nearby, ladies erupted. 2 copper coins, what's she selling, air? What's her profit, smiles? Yesterday, Margaret was charging like she was Cleopatra. Today, she's doing clearance. Is she trying to tank the whole street? The tension? You could pluck it like a lute string. All that was missing was the dramatic dun-dun-dun soundtrack, and you'd have yourself a medieval soap opera. And some nights words weren't enough. Hands got involved too. Ah yes, the legendary Battle of the Billowing Skirts, between red-haired Isolde and the ever-mysterious Lady Brunhild, known for her black lace and sharp elbows. They both spotted the same target, a fresh-off-the-boat Italian merchant, doe-eyed like a lamb, but with a coin purse plump as a prize-winning pig. Isolde struck first, her voice sweet as church bells. "Kind sir, are you fond of music? I sing in 7 languages, 3 of which even I don't understand." But Brunhild emerged from the shadows, her dress catching wind like sails on a pirate ship. "Well, I dance like the wind itself, and I can make you feel like you're in a Venetian palace even if you're just sinking into a wobbly wooden chair. Who won, no one knows. All we know is the merchant left undecided, and the ladies. They tumbled together into an empty wine barrel. The scent of sour grapes and floral perfume mingled into what would later be called portside eau de disaster. Truth is, in this lipstick and claw competition, nobody was truly villainous. They were just survivors. Breakfast was watered-down porridge, rent was overdue, and torn dresses had to be stitched using thread, borrowed from the tavern's laundry basket. So no, they couldn't just sit back while that woman smiled brighter. And thus the medieval marketing war raged on, where slogans weren't on signs but hidden in glances, voices, and lips that knew how to spin a tale. A lady who could laugh at the perfect moment, sigh like a poet, and whisper, "She's got fleas, you know," while sounding holier than a hymn book. That lady? She won. This world of courtesans wasn't just dancing and stolen kisses. It was a battlefield of wit, value, and hustle for a spot in the drafty tavern full of whispers and wind. And if you think this all sounds outdated, well, welcome, dear friend, to medieval showbiz, where the drama's thicker than the soup and twice as spicy. When the lute had gone quiet, the oil lamps dimmed, and the last of the patrons stumbled out into the night with wine on their breath and shame in their collars, the weary courtesan dragged her aching feet back to her cramped little lodging, in the attic, where rain leaked through the tiles and sometimes dripped right onto her pillow. The door creaked open, as if even it knew there was nothing cheerful waiting inside. She sank into a wobbly chair. Her worn-out shoes fell heavily from her feet. Her dress was wrinkled, her makeup smudged, lipstick half-faded, hair undone, and for the first time that day she was just herself. No longer the tavern's muse. No longer a fleeting delight for nameless gentlemen. Just a woman, tired, alone, and all too human. On the table sat a small cloth pouch. The coins inside jingled as she poured them out. Some silver, a few cheap brass tokens. She counted each one slowly, not out of fear of miscounting, but because counting money was the only thing left she could control in her life. Each coin was a forced smile, a feigned look of desire. Each coin was a skipped breakfast to afford. Rouge, a sleepless night because someone next door snored like a dying goat. Each coin was a trade, between pride and a hot meal, between dreams and hard reality. Some nights she wondered, if she were born a stray cat, at least she could yowl on rooftops without being called loose. But she was born human, and, worse, a woman, in a time when a woman's worth wasn't measured by wit or wisdom, but by skin, by eyes, and the ability to make a man forget himself for a moment. Sometimes she imagined, if only I'd gone to school, sang on a real stage, not on a beer-stained table. If only someone looked at me not like a product, but like a person. And then she laughed, a dry, brittle sound that no one heard. Sometimes crying seemed easier, but crying took strength too, and tears, well, they didn't pay the rent. She folded the pouch and slipped it beneath her pillow, the safest place for a woman with no lockbox, no one to guard her. Then she lay down, curling up like a child in the womb, hoping tonight's dreams wouldn't smell of wine, wouldn't echo with shouts, wouldn't leave her hollow after false embraces. And when the moonlight slipped in through the little window and touched her closed eyelids, we understood Behind the powder, behind the practiced smile, was still a heart that dared to dream. A medieval courtesan, judged by history, yet rarely heard. Tonight, she lived. And tomorrow, she would live. Again, because somewhere tucked inside every sigh was hope, frail as a strand of hair, but strong enough to hold her upright in life's headwinds. Some cry from loneliness, not because no one's around. Taverns are always full, laughter and chatter echo into the night, and strange hands graze shoulders, waists, even the soul, but no one truly sees them. To feel invisible in a crowd is the quietest kind of lonely, where smiles are just masks, flirty banter reads like a worn-out script, and all the real words you long to say are whispered only to your own reflection in the mirror. Some dream of marrying a nobleman. Girls who often gaze out the window, fingers playing with the frayed lace on a worn dress. Every time a knight strides into the tavern, they don't look at the coin pouch on his belt, but into his eyes, listen to his voice, and imagine the faraway castles in his stories. They dream of a day when there's no more cleaning up spilled. No more dodging crude pats on the back. Just a quiet morning walk by the lake dressed in silk, and someone calling her my lady instead of all those names that burn. But dreams like that tend to vanish like the last bubbles in a beer mug, because a nobleman might bet a tavern girl, but rarely ever weds her. Status won't allow it, tradition won't allow it, and a man's pride certainly won't allow. Then there are the more practical ones, the ones who write fake love letters to earn a few extra coins. She might not read, but thanks to the letter writer at the market, she can send her longing to an aging merchant or a lonely old soldier. Lavish words on old parchment, scented with cheap perfume, whispering of moonlit nights, thinking, few, and a heart that burns when your eyes are far. And oddly enough, some believe them. Some carry those letters into battle, tucked in their breast pocket like a lucky charm. Some return just to give her a rusted bracelet, murmuring, "You're the first woman who ever made me feel loved." It's not really deception. It's survival, in one of its more poetic forms. Because when real love gets crushed by cold, reality, sometimes the only way to endure, is to paint an illusion vivid enough to keep yourself afloat. Among these women, everyone holds a story. Tragic, sharp, surprisingly wise, and burning with life. History may slap the label wicked on them, but sit beside one with a weak drink and a strong heart, and you'll discover philosophers in disguise. They know how to swim when life throws them into the deep. They know how to smile through internal storms. They know how to turn a sad night into a tiny celebration, just to survive until tomorrow. And in all those ups and downs, who's to say, maybe one night, under flickering candlelight, they aren't just someone's plaything. Maybe, just for a moment, they're simply themselves. Women who love, who hope, and who tell stories of life with laughter that stings like cheap wine. Because even in a profession no mother ever dreams for her daughter, they still find ways to live, to laugh, and once in a while, to dream a dream so sweet it lasts until the rooster crows at dawn. When we think about the lives of medieval courtesans, we often picture sparkling scenes, golden candlelight flickering in taverns, flowing dresses swaying gently, and the enchanting melodies of flutes playing softly. But behind that velvet curtain lies a dark world full of struggles few dare to understand. Calling it a hidden shadow few know about wouldn't be far from the truth. First of all, these women had to endure harsh contempt from society. Even though they were skilled in their craft, knowing how to sing, dance, and charm their clients, they were still seen as mere commodities. Nobles sneered, peasants looked down on them, and even the upper class often avoided them like contagious disease. They had no official status in the social ledger, no rightful place, just a tiny, faded dot, even if they were the brightest spot in the darkest night. It was a wordless shame, a bitter irony of life. On top of that, in cities, with laws, courtesans faced dreaded regular health inspections, a terrifying ordeal. These examinations were anything but gentle. They often involved harsh and sometimes brutal procedures. The women had to grit their teeth to endure them, lest they be banned from working or quarantined. It was a torment both physical and mental, a purity check, in a world that never truly saw them as ordinary people. Many called it a medical hell, because each visit brought not only health scrutiny, but also the fear of stigma and being treated like a dangerous patient. Then, there was the struggle to survive, a bleak, unstable picture. They had no permanent refuge, cramped rooms to rent, scraping together every penny to pay the rent, sometimes skipping payment and hiding to avoid debt collectors. No one spoke of a home or family, just dark corners of the city, cold alleys, the faint glow of tavern lights, and laughter mixed with sobs. The most painful story was about love. Most courtesans lived in deep loneliness, rarely allowed or trusted to have true love. Relationships were fleeting, temporary, or just ways to please customers. Many even had to invent fake love letters to squeeze more coins from hopeless romantics. Real love, the kind everyone longs for, was a luxury they rarely touched. Yet through all the hardships, shadows, and harsh realities, these women remained strong. They smiled amid life's storms, holding on to a fragile hope for a brighter tomorrow. That, my friend, is the deeply moving truth. A story not just of tragedy, but a testament to the fierce spirit of strong souls, forgotten by society yet fighting to live. And that, my friend, is what the spotlight never shows, the quiet darkness behind the soft melodies and raucous laughter of medieval courtesans, a world denied but ever present, full of bitter lives that never stop fighting, to survive and to be loved, even if just once in a lifetime. A day in the life of a medieval courtesan, where glamour and harshness weave together like a tapestry of light and shadow, is far from easy. It's a life that dazzles beneath tavern lights with enchanting songs, yet is filled with trials, loneliness, and secrets no one knows. From simple or noble breakfasts in the morning, to seductive performances, tricky diplomatic negotiations, and quiet moments of confession in a small chamber, the courtesan is not just a symbol of allure, but also of resilience and survival in medieval society. So what about you? If given the choice, would you live as the courtesan, where laughter mixes with tears, or as a noble, surrounded by lavish feasts and secret schemes? Or maybe something simpler, the owner of a tavern where every story begins and ends, where laughter blends with bittersweet sips of wine? Leave a comment below and share your choice, and tell me which character from the medieval world you'd like me to explore next. Who knows, the next journey might be the story you've been waiting for. Thanks for joining me. See you soon in the next captivating tale.